You've heard about all those reports about The Exorcist and the trouble it's causing.
I don't like it. I want to go home.
Makes my heart beat too fast.
But the thing that really surprises me is people faint. I mean, I've never in my life known a movie where people would faint. I mean, it's hard to make people faint.
There are horror movies that scare you, and then there's The Exorcist, a film so disturbing, so haunted that it didn't just terrify audiences, it possessed them. Moviegoers were reportedly vomiting, fainting, and fleeing mid-film, unable to watch till the end. There were even reports of women having miscarriages during screenings, and a man in New York suffered a heart attack during the film's climax. This wasn't just a standard horror film, this was something entirely new, a film that seemed to physically affect its audience. But what those terrified viewers didn't know was the horrors that they witnessed on screen were just shadows of the true terror the cast and crew had already endured. Behind the scenes of The Exorcist was a production plagued by disaster, death, and strange events that would spawn one of Hollywood's most famous legends. That The Exorcist isn't just a film about a curse, but a cursed film itself. The countless accidents that took place while filming were far too frequent to be brushed off as mere coincidences. Multiple cast members had family that passed away, and others were injured in ways that would change their lives forever. While working on the film, a carpenter lost his thumb, a lighting technician lost one of his toes. By the time the film was ready to be released, 9 people connected to it would be dead. It's safe to say that this production was 100% cursed, and I've barely scratched the surface. And the alleged curse wasn't just limited to those making the film. People who watched it claimed that it had a presence, that something followed them after they finished it. In one infamous case, a man allegedly dropped dead while waiting in line. In another, a woman threw herself against a theater exit with such force that she fractured her jaw. Some Catholic priests refused to see the film, and others were brought to screenings not as guests but as spiritual protection. So what really happened during the making of The Exorcist? Was it all just paranoia and bad luck, or did something more sinister seep through the frame? From the real-life exorcism that inspired the story to the film's director who pushed his actors to their limits. In today's video, we're gonna uncover the chilling truth behind one of the most controversial, terrifying, and legendary horror films of all time.
But no one could possibly have anticipated what was to happen at every theater where this film played.
Before we dive into the eerie events that haunted the making of the film, we need to understand what The Exorcist actually is and why it was created. This cultural phenomenon didn't begin in a Hollywood studio, but in the deep, quiet corners of American suburbia. The story begins in 1949 with a 14-year-old boy named Roland Doe. Over time, Roland developed a fascination with the paranormal, a curiosity that only deepened when his aunt gifted him a Ouija board. I'm sorry, who gets gifted a Ouija board? That should be illegal. Not long after the aunt's death, the family started experiencing weird and bizarre disturbances. Furniture moving on its own, unexplained shaking, eerie sounds, and even objects flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. His family, devout Lutherans, initially turned to medical professionals, but when science failed them, they turned to the church. Over the span of several months, Jesuit priests performed a series of exorcisms on the boy, but things quickly spiraled out of control. During the ritual, Roland reportedly broke free from his restraints, tore a bed spring off the mattress, and started using it as a weapon, forcing the exorcism to be called off. In the wake of that failed attempt, the strange events only escalated. Roland began showing unexplained scratches on his body. At one point, the words Lewis appeared across his skin. His mother, who had roots in St. Louis, took it as a sign and traveled to the Georgetown University Hospital in search for answers. Once there, a group of priests visited the house and witnessed the disturbing events firsthand. The bed was shaking, objects flying across the room, and Roland speaking in a deep guttural voice while reacting violently to religious symbols. They began performing the exorcism, which was just pure chaos, and at one point, Roland even broke the priest's nose. But surprisingly, it actually ended up working, and Roland went on to live a normal, happy life. Now look, it's hard to verify the validity of this story, and I have to admit, I am a bit of a skeptic when it comes to this kind of stuff. There has been a few people who have done research into this story and claim that Roland was a school bully who used to throw tantrums to get out of school. And it's also worth remembering that this happened in 1949 before we had any real understanding about mental health. If something like that unfolded today, it would be viewed in a very different lens, and that's probably why we don't hear of demonic possessions happening today. But for the sake of this spooky video, let's just pretend we live in 1949 and that the story's real. The news of this possession spread like wildfire through the town, and and a writer named William Peter Blatty was fascinated by the situation. The very idea that the devil could possess a child in a modern, everyday, upper-middle-class home is a terrifying concept. It brought the ancient fears of good and evil into a suburban American home, and by doing so, it brought up the terrifying question, what if all of this was real? The story lodged itself in William's imagination, and he spent years researching, writing, and refining his novel, which was published in 1971. The Exorcist became a surprise hit, and it stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for over 50 weeks and sold more than 13 million copies. It was a huge success, but more than that, it terrified people in a way that few books ever had. The horror wasn't flashy with big monsters, it was quiet, creepy, and downright haunting. William's story blurred the line between fiction and reality so well, many readers were convinced the story was real. Of course, it didn't take long for Hollywood to come knocking, eager to secure the rights for a film adaptation. Fortunately, William wasn't a newcomer. He had experience in the industry, and he knew all too well about how studios can exploit fresh talent. So he approached Warner Bros. With a deal. He would sell the rights to them, but only if he was allowed to produce and write the screenplay. Surprisingly, the studio actually agreed, but sadly, no one was prepared for just how far the filmmakers would go. When William Friedkin was hired to direct the film, he had just come off the success of The French Connection, a gritty crime drama that won him an Oscar. Friedkin was an unusual choice for a supernatural story, but they believed that his grounded and documentary-style approach would be perfect for this film. They didn't want it to feel like a movie, they wanted it to feel like something real. Warner Bros. Executives were initially hesitant about the project's controversial religious content, but eventually committed to giving it a $12 million budget, which is equivalent to about $80 million today. So it was clear that Warner Bros. Had a lot of faith in the story, and Friedkin took the material seriously. Very seriously. He read real transcripts, interviewed priests, and even watched a live exorcism in the Bronx. His commitment to authenticity bled into every frame of this film. He rejected over-the-top visual effects in favor of practical ones, even if they were dangerous. He made the actors endure freezing temperatures, physical strain, and psychological pressure to get the reactions he wanted. Trust me, that is only the beginning of what he put them through, but we will touch on that in just a moment. Location scouting brought the production to Georgetown, where they got permission to film in the neighborhoods that William imagined the story in. For the crucial role of Reagan McNeil, the possessed girl at the center of the story, they did a nationwide search, seeing hundreds of young actresses before discovering 12-year-old Linda Blair. Her combination of innocence and surprising emotional maturity convinced both the director and author that she could handle the demanding role. For the film's other roles, they wanted established drama actors instead of just the usual horror regulars. Ellen Burstyn, fresh from her Oscar nomination for The Last Picture Show, signed on to play Reagan's mother, and Jason Miller was cast as the role of the priest. Both amazing casting choices. As pre-production finished in 1972, few in Hollywood understood what Friedkin and William were attempting to do. This wasn't just another horror film, it was an attempt to create something that would confront audiences with their deepest fears about faith, evil, and the vulnerability of innocence. And this chilling origin was only just the beginning. What came next blurred the lines between movie and myth, between entertainment and fear. Because soon, things on set began to go horribly wrong. It's one thing to make a movie about the supernatural, it's another when strange, unexplainable things begin to happen on set. Ones that left many people questioning if the film awakened something that should have been left undisturbed. Just as the production was scheduled to start filming, a fire broke out on set that destroyed the studio and everything in it. What makes this event so eerie, however, was that there was one part of the set that remained untouched. Reagan's bedroom. The very room where the young girl undergoes her demonic possession. Some said it was a freak accident, others whispered that it was the work of something more sinister, a force trying to sabotage the project. But actually, I'm pretty sure the real reason for it was that there was a bird that flew into the circuit board. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Either way, the crew had to rebuild the set from scratch, and it delayed the production by 6 weeks. But the setbacks didn't stop there. During his first week on set, Max von Sydow, who played Father Merrin, received news that his brother had passed away, prompting him to return to Sweden for the funeral. Around the same time, Linda Blair, the young actress portraying Regan, suffered her own personal loss when her grandfather died, causing yet another delay in production. After months of rescheduling, the filming filming was finally ready to take place, but sadly, things only got worse from here. One of the most disturbing elements of The Exorcist was how far the director, William Friedkin, was willing to go to capture the true essence of horror. For him, no special effect was too extreme, no scene too intense if it meant making the film feel real. And this philosophy directly affected the cast in ways that were sometimes brutal. One morning, the crew arrived to find the set blanketed in a layer of thin snow, which wouldn't have been weird except for the fact that the set was entirely indoors. You see, the director had a crazy idea and wanted the bedroom set to be cold enough so that the audiences could see the actor's breath, like it's described in the book. To achieve this, they installed a refrigeration system on set that lowered the temperature to minus 29 degrees Celsius, or for my Americans, minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Just insanely cold. So yeah, you could say that his directing style was very method. He famously fired guns on set without warning to startle actors. He slapped a priest right across the face just before filming a scene and pushed his cast to psychological extremes. To him, fear had to be authentic, not acted. Linda Blair, who was just 12 years old, endured physical and psychological trauma that no child should ever face. There's a scene in the movie where Reagan's body is being violently shaken around to mimic the act of possession. This was not achieved through CGI or visual effects, but through an actual mechanical structure that she was strapped to. During one of the takes, a piece of rigging broke loose and injured her, which had her screaming and crying in pain. Unfortunately, the crew just assumed that she was really into character, so no one knew to stop the scene. Linda had actually fractured her lower back, leading to a lifelong struggle with scoliosis. Can you imagine being thrown around like that with a broken back? And they used that take in the movie as well. You can literally see how much pain she's in. Shockingly, Linda wasn't the only one who sustained lifelong injuries from filming. Ellen Burstyn, who played Reagan's mum, suffered the most notorious injury during the filming of a pivotal scene. In the script, her character is thrown violently across the room by her possessed daughter's supernatural strength. To achieve this effect, Ellen was harnessed to a wire pull device operated by a stunt coordinator. The director, notorious for his pursuit of authentic reactions, instructed the stunt team to pull her harder than expected. Ellen, who was 40 during the shoot, recalls being pushed to the brink, filming the sequence over and over again. After 3 takes, Ellen went to Friedkin and told him that the stunt team were pulling her way too hard and that it hurts. In response, he simply told her, well, it has to look real. The result was catastrophic. Ellen was yanked with such force that she was thrown onto her coccyx, screaming in excruciating pain. Instead of stopping the take and rushing to her aid, the director jumps at the genuine moment of pain and continues to film her. Am I the only one who thought of David Dobrik when they heard that? When Ellen later confronted him about the incident, he was unapologetic, insisting that the authentic reaction was crucial for the scene's impact. Since the accident, Ellen has said that her back never fully recovered. The injuries and the series of odd accidents weren't just bad luck, they began to feel like omens, symbols of the very evil that the film was trying to depict. This set was rumored to be haunted, with several crew members claiming they witnessed objects moving on their own. One of the most unsettling reports involved a telephone used for on-set communication that reportedly lifted off the receiver and dropped again without any explanation. Cameras would malfunction, film would suddenly jam, and sound equipment would pick up inexplainable static and interference. Crew members reported feeling physically ill after prolonged exposure to the bedroom set, describing symptoms ranging from nausea to unexplained anxiety attacks. In an interview with the film's cinematographer, Owen Rosman found the technical difficulties baffling, saying, "We'd test the equipment before bringing it onto that particular set and it would work perfectly. Then within minutes of setting up in Reagan's bedroom, we'd experience malfunctions that our technicians couldn't explain." The director actually ended up bringing in a priest to bless the set in hopes that it would ease the crew's anxiety. But unfortunately, the bizarre occurrences just kept getting worse. It wasn't just that the set seemed cursed, but everyone involved in production. As filming progressed, the production was struck with a series of strange deaths that seemed too numerous to be coincidences. Like I mentioned before, Linda's grandfather and Max's brother both passed away just weeks into filming. In addition to that, the assistant cameraman's newborn baby, a security guard, and a technician all unexpectedly passed away. But it didn't stop there. Actor Jason Miller's toddler son was tragically struck by a motorbike and killed during filming. By this point, it was impossible to ignore the bizarre pattern. Crew members were plagued by accidents, injuries, and personal misfortunes. Some suggested that there was something otherworldly at work, that the very subject of the film had actually cursed the production. Whether that's true or not, the crew couldn't help but feel like they were caught in something beyond their control. And this continued even after filming was finished. Just months before the film's release, Vasiliki Maliaros, who played Father Karras's mother, sadly passed after suffering a heart attack. Jack McGoran, who played Burke Dennins in the film, contracted a severe case of pneumonia and passed away just 1 week after he finished filming. What made it especially unsettling was the eerie parallel between fiction and reality. Both actors played characters who died in the film, and then they both died in real life right after filming before the movie was even released. That connection left everyone involved deeply unsettled. By the time The Exorcist was released in 1973, a total of 9 people connected to the film had died. Actress Ellen Burstyn was asked her thoughts on the curse, to which she replied saying, "I don't know if it was a jinx really, but there was something really strange going on during the making of the film. We were dealing with some really heavy material, and you don't fool around with that kind of stuff without manifesting it in some way." Tragically, the unsettling string of misfortunes tied to the movie didn't end after the film was released. Mercedes McCambridge, the actress behind the chilling voice of the demon, played a vital role in making the film so terrifying.
Now kindly undo these straps.
To create the unearthly sound, she pushed herself to disturbing extremes, chain smoking, drinking whiskey, swallowing raw eggs, and even being physically restrained to a chair. But in 1987, Mercedes faced a real-life nightmare after her son committed an unthinkable act by taking the lives of his wife and children before ending his own. It was a devastating and deeply disturbing turn in a legacy of a film that was already surrounded by tragedy. As if the story couldn't get any creepier, another chilling connection emerged, and this time it was centered around a man named Paul Bateson, who was an extra in the film. Paul happened to be a real-life X-ray technician at NYU Medical Center, the very hospital where one of the scenes was filmed. In a horrifying turn of events, Paul was convicted of murdering film critic Addison Verrill in 1977 and sentenced to 20 years in jail. Whilst in jail, he became the prime suspect in a series of other murders involving at least 6 men, to which he actually confessed to in prison. However, due to the insufficient evidence, he was never actually charged with these crimes. He ended up serving over 24 years in prison before being released on parole in 2003, which concluded in 2008. However, since then, there has been no records of his whereabouts, leaving his fate a chilling mystery. Were these all just coincidences, a clustering of accidents and tragedies that could happen on any high-pressure film set? Was it the power of suggestion, with Williams' disturbing story creating a psychological environment where people become hyper-aware to anything unusual? Or had the production actually stirred into something supernatural, something that didn't want to be on film? In an interview, the director gave his opinion on the curse, saying, "I don't know if the devil was on our set or not, but I know that everyone who worked on that film came away changed by the experience." When The Exorcist was finally ready to be released in late 1973, few at Warner Bros. Anticipated the cultural earthquake that they were about to release. The marketing department recognized the film's ability to shock audiences and created one of the most disturbing promotional campaigns in cinema history. The original trailer hardly gave anything away, only featuring images that flashed too quickly to be consciously processed. I'm not even joking, the entire 2-minute trailer is just flashing white images that appear for only a fraction of a second. These marketing tactics primed audiences for what would be considered one of the most terrifying theatrical experiences in history. The haunting curse associated with The Exorcist was far from over. As moviegoers lined up in the winter cold to see the film everyone was talking about, they had no idea that their reactions would become as legendary as the film itself. The 26th of December, 1973, the day after Christmas. While most Americans were recovering from holiday celebrations, theaters across the country were preparing for something unprecedented. Warner Bros. Deliberately chose to release the movie during the festive season in an attempt to catch audiences off guard, which I just think is hilarious. The film grossed over $1.9 million in its first week, which is an extraordinary figure for 1973. By the end of its theatrical run, it would earn over $112 million domestically, which is equivalent to around $600 million today, making it the highest grossing R-rated horror film of all time, a record it would hold for 44 years. But these impressive numbers only tell part of the story. What truly set the movie apart wasn't how many people watched it, but what happened to them after they did. As the film rolled through packed cinemas, reports from all over the country began flooding in. People weren't just scared, they were physically reacting to what they were seeing. Fainting, vomiting, hysterical crying, uncontrollable screaming. There was even people having seizures, miscarriages, and temporary psychosis. There was one woman who ended up suing Warner Bros, claiming that the film's subliminal messages caused her to faint and break her jaw. The studio ended up settling the claim out of court for an undisclosed amount. It's safe to say that audiences weren't prepared in the slightest, and how could they be? It was the 70s. In that age, many people had only seen ghosts in sheets, amateur movie monsters, and blood that looked like ketchup. But The Exorcist? That was personal. It told a story about evil that wasn't somewhere out there, it was in your house, in your daughter. It wasn't afraid to touch the untouchable. Religion, innocence, childhood, and even your own body. The horror didn't just come from jump scares, it came from pure terror. The movie was actually never expected to do that well, but after rumors of people fainting during screenings, the news spread like wildfire. Crowds of moviegoers waited for hours in the freezing rain and sleet just to get a chance to see the film. They were even lighting bonfires just to try and keep warm. Trash piled up, people were getting into fistfights, and local businesses grew frustrated as their doorways were blocked by massive crowds. According to one security guard, bribes of over $100 were being offered just to cut the line, and scalpers were reportedly selling tickets for $50. Everyone was desperate to experience it for themselves. I actually can't believe this is real footage from the screenings. It genuinely had people going crazy. Hospitals started flooding with patients who would come in complaining of headaches and hearing voices, convinced that they were possessed. It was just mayhem. After its successful run in America, the film started to be released worldwide, and things just kept escalating. Fainting, vomiting, seizures, panic attacks, the film was a psychological grenade. Some screenings even had vomit bags handed out before the movie even began, and that wasn't just for theatrics. Physical reactions were so intense that they had to have ambulances on standby. In more conservative areas, some cinemas just refused to show the film altogether. In others, they encouraged the madness, marketing the movie as some extreme roller coaster. Perhaps the most famous incident happened in Rome, where the film premiered just a mile outside of Vatican City. During a particularly intense moment in the film, a bolt of lightning struck a 400-year-old cross on top of a nearby church, sending it crashing to the ground. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the symbolism of it was enough to terrify audiences. What I found the most interesting was the religious response to the film. Across America, priests found themselves answering hundreds of calls from frightened viewers suddenly desperate to confess to sins that they hadn't thought about in years. Church attendance rose, confession booths filled up, and yes, requests for exorcisms actually increased. Interestingly, churches everywhere had conflicting views on the film. While the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops officially deemed the film unsuitable, there was a quiet acknowledgement with religious circles that The Exorcist had done something extraordinary. It had reignited faith. Some priests admitted that the film portrayed evil so convincingly that it made people believe, well, if the devil is real, then God must be too. It's important to understand that this was 1973. There was no social media, no YouTube reaction videos, yet the movie's rumors spread across the world. People were claiming that the film was cursed, that if you watched it, something would follow you home. And the movie didn't just terrify audiences, it terrified the government and censorship boards across the world. In the UK, although it premiered in cinemas with an X rating, the real controversy exploded in the 1980s during the home video boom. The film was never officially banned, but the British Board of Film Classification refused to certify it for home release. For over a decade, the film was banned from home viewing, making it like a forbidden fruit for horror fans. Countries like Singapore, Malaysia, and many more ended up either banning the film or only allowing censored versions. When it finally returned to cinemas in 1998, it was met with overwhelming demand. A year later, the home release was finally approved, but by then, The Exorcist had already cemented its place as one of the most feared and suppressed films in history. In the end, we were left with something more than a film. Mysterious deaths, shaken actors, mass hysteria, and a pop culture shadow that continues to stretch across generations. It did what no film had ever done before. It redefined horror. It changed the way that we talked about evil. It's been 50 years since its release, and The Exorcist still doesn't feel like just a movie. It feels like a warning, like a work of fiction that somehow slipped too close to the truth, not because it documented something real, but because it made us believe that it could be. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this in the comments, and if you made it this far, let me know your favorite horror movie. My favorite horror movie of all time is 100% The Shining. That is I can't even speak. There is no words to describe it. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you so much for the overwhelming support recently, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!